Good morning. Today I'll be discussing glycogen metabolism and the various types of questions that has come in the university exam. Now, glycogen metabolism can be given as such. This you can see question number 4. Describe glycogen metabolism. When you are asked such a question, then you should write on the steps of glycogenesis. You have to write the steps of glycogenolysis, and you have to mention about the regulation of glycogen, that is the glycogenolysis and glycogenesis. Then you have to briefly talk about the glycogen disorders. Now, sometimes they will be very specific in their question, like in question 1, they ask you about in detail about glycogenesis, or they may ask you to explain the reactions of glycogenesis in flow diagrams, and sometimes they may ask both glycogenesis and glycogenolysis, when you should be able to give the various reactions of glycogenesis and glycogenolysis if asked with the corresponding figures. Okay, so along with that, if it is a 10-mark question, they may ask you to give the process of regulation, or they may ask you about some of the disorders and the enzyme defects which are characteristic of that disorder. So these are the two aspects of glycogen metabolism, that is the actual reactions of synthesis, the regulation, and the third aspect is the glycogen storage disorders. So the glycogen storage disorders, the most important is the von Gog's disease. So that may come as a 3 marks or a 5 marks or a 2-mark question. Along with that, you may be in certain other papers, what we have seen is they have specifically asked you for 3 glycogen storage disorders and give its biochemical defect. Okay, they have also asked specifically, like Cory's disease, what is the enzyme deficiency? McArdle's disease, what is the enzyme defect? So it has come in that form also. Okay, and in von Gog's disease, please check what is the marks they have assigned to it, and accordingly, when you are asked about a biochemical defect, not only mention the enzyme defect, but also say that biochemically what other parameters, like if there is fasting hypoglycemia, if there is hyperlipidemia. So you should be able to mention all those factors when they ask you about the biochemical defect, depending upon how much marks has been assigned to it, apart from the clinical features. So I'll be talking about that in a little while. So let's look at the first aspect, and that is, if you are asked a question on either glycogen metabolism or specifically on glycogenesis and glycogenolysis, what all will you write? Now, glycogen metabolism, as I told you, includes both glycogenesis and glycogenolysis. So you should first define what is glycogenesis. That is the conversion of glucose to glycogen. Where does this synthesis occur? The main organs are the liver and the muscle. Now, what is its role? What is the role of glycogen in the muscle? In the muscle, it serves as a fuel to generate ATP. What is its role in the liver? It maintains the blood glucose concentration, particularly in the fasting state. Now, what are the steps of glycogenesis? The first step is the phosphorylation of glucose to glucose 6-phosphate. Now, there are 2 enzymes. The enzyme which is specific to muscle is the hexokinase, and the one which is specific to the liver is the glucokinase. Once glucose 6-phosphate is formed, then it gets converted to glucose 1-phosphate, and this is done by the enzyme phosphoglucomutase. Once glucose 1-phosphate is formed, then it is transferring the glucose onto UTP, and with the help of the enzyme UDPG pyrophosphorylase, this UTP is converted to UDPG, that is UDP glucose, and a pyrophosphate molecule is being released. Now, how is the glycogen synthesis initiated? This is initiated by the enzyme glycogen synthase. This is one of the key enzymes of glycogen synthesis. But this enzyme cannot initiate the chain synthesis because it cannot accept the glucose as the acceptor. It cannot accept glucose directly. So it can only elongate an existing chain of glucose. So what serves as the initiator? The initiator can be either a fragment of glycogen or it can be a 37 kilodalton protein which is known as glycogenin. Now, glycogenin acts as both an enzyme and a substrate, and it takes up glucose residues from UDP glucose. It keeps on extending by accepting the glucose to around 6-7 glucose residues. So, glycogenin is accepting glucose residues from UDP glucose. The chain gets extended to 7 or more glucose residues, and this forms the glycogen primer. At this point, glycogen synthase can now enter and begin glycogen synthesis by extending the primer. So this diagram very elegantly shows how the initial steps of glycogen synthesis occur. First step, as I told you, is the formation of glucose 6-phosphate. Glucose 6-phosphate is converted to glucose 1-phosphate by the enzyme phosphoglucomutase. Glucose 1-phosphate then donates the glucose group to UTP to form UDP glucose. UTP then releases one pyrophosphate molecule. UDP glucose is now able to transfer the glucose unit to the initiator molecule, which is glycogenin. So glycogenin keeps on accepting the glucose from UDP glucose till around 7 glucose residues. It's extended by 7 or more glucose residues. At this point, glycogen synthetase comes into play, and it keeps on now elongating the chain by adding glucose residues. So glycogen synthase is able to form 1,4-glycosidic linkage at the non-reducing outer end of the primer molecule. So it is extending the chain of glycogen in a linear way. But as you all know, glycogen is not a linear molecule, it is a branch molecule. So how does the branching occur? When the chain has lengthened to about 11 residues, a new enzyme, that is the branching enzyme, will transfer a segment of 6 glucose residues to the C6OH group of the same or neighboring chain to form a branch polymer. So the branching enzyme therefore forms a 1,6 linkage. Now once this branch is formed, then the glycogen synthase will again keep on adding glucose residues at the non-reducing end, and both the branches will then keep getting elongated, and the process will continue. Again, when 11 residues are formed in one of the branches, 6 of these glucose residues will get transferred to the neighboring chain, and it forms a branch point. Okay, and the process will continue. The enzyme, the branching enzyme, is also known as amylo alpha 1,4 alpha 1,6 transglucosidase. So what is important in glycogen synthesis is the steps of glycogen synthesis, as I have told you, and very important because is the figure. Without the figure, it is not possible to understand how the branch is being created. Now let's look at the breakdown of glycogen, which is otherwise known as glycogenolysis. So you have to first write the definition. Definition is, what is glycogenolysis? It's the breakdown of glycogen to glucose. And this was elucidated by two scientists, Carl Corey and Gerty Corey. This glycogenolysis is not a reversal of synthesis, and we require an independent set of enzymes. So in this process, what happens? The large glycogen molecule is getting shortened. The key enzyme here is glycogen phosphorylase. Now, glycogen phosphorylase will start cleaving the alpha-1,4 glucosidic linkage at the non-reducing end of the glycogen chain by simple phosphorylases. And it releases the glucose not as free glucose but as glucose 1-phosphate. Okay. This continues till 4 glucose units remain on each chain before a branch point. So this shows the shortening of the chain with the help of the enzyme phosphorylase. So here we are seeing only 3 glucose residues maybe on the branch. What does glycogen phosphorylase do? From the non-reducing end, it removes 1 glucose as glucose 1-phosphate. Okay. So what is remaining from the 3 glucose units? You get 2 glucose. It is shortened by 1 residue, so there is only 2 glucose units here. Now what happened? Just like in glycogenesis, you needed a branching enzyme. Here we require a debranching enzyme. This debranching enzyme is a protein with 2 enzymic activities. You have a oligo alpha-1,4 glucan transferase activity. So what does this enzyme do? It removes the outer 3 of the 4 glucosyl residues attached at the branch. The 3 residues are transferred to the non-reducing end of another chain, and that is then lengthened by 3 residues, and what is left behind is a 1 glucose residue at the branch point. So an alpha-1,4 bond is broken and an alpha-1,4 bond is made, and so the enzyme acts as a 4,4 transferase. So this figure very nicely shows what happens during debranching. You find that in the first portion, you find first reaction we see that phosphorylase is going to break the alpha-1,4 linkages, and it keeps on breaking it till there are 4 glucose residues on each branch at the branch point. When this happens, this 4,4 glucan transferase will now transfer 3 of the residues from one of the branches to the other branch, leaving a single glucose residue at the branch point. So one of the branches has been lengthened now by 3 glucose residues, and it is now the other branch has been left with only 1 glucose residue at the branch point. This is now removed by another enzyme which is known as the amylo 1,6 glucosidase debranching enzyme. So what are you left with? Only a straight chain. In that branch is only a straight chain of glucose residues, and this is now broken down by glucose 1-phosphorylase because there is only 1,4 linkage here in the straight chain or the linear chain, and this process continues till the glycogen is completely broken down. Now what happens to the glucose 1-phosphate? So whenever glycogen phosphorylase removes the glucose from the non-reducing end, I told you the glucose is released as glucose 1-phosphate. What happens to glucose 1-phosphate? The glucose 1-phosphate gets converted to glucose 6-phosphate by the enzyme phosphoglucomutase. In muscle, glucose 6-phosphate is the end product because it does not contain the enzyme glucose 6-phosphatase. In the liver and kidney, however, the glucose 6-phosphate is further hydrolyzed to glucose by the enzyme glucose 6-phosphatase. So, the fate of glucose 1-phosphate. By the breakdown of glycogen, I told you get glucose 1-phosphate. By the enzyme phosphoglucomutase, it is converted to glucose 6-phosphate. In the muscle and the brain, the glucose 6-phosphate can go through the glycolytic pathway giving pyruvate or lactate under anaerobic condition. Glucose 6-phosphate in the liver can be acted upon by the enzyme glucose 6-phosphatase, and this can be directly converted to glucose, which can enter the circulation and is taken to different tissues as a source of energy. Glucose 6-phosphate can also enter the pentose phosphate pathway and can give rise to ribose phosphate and NADPH. Around 1 to 3% of glycogen can be degraded by a lysosomal enzyme, which is an alpha-1,4-glucosidase enzyme, otherwise known as acid maltase. The deficiency of this enzyme results in the accumulation of glycogen in the vacuoles of lysosomes, and this results in the glycogen storage disorder, that is type 2 Pompe's disease. So this is the only glycogen storage disease that is also a lysosomal storage disorder. So the next aspect is, we looked at synthesis, glycogenesis and glycogenolysis, the different steps, and particularly the diagrams which are associated with it. Now let's look at the regulation. As you know, it is very important to maintain the blood sugar levels. So the synthesis and degradation has to be tightly controlled. In the liver, glycogenesis increases during the well-fed state and glycogenolysis increases during periods of fasting. In the muscle, glycogenolysis increases during active exercise and glycogenesis begins when the muscle is at rest. Now, regulation occurs at 3 levels. You have the hormonal regulation, the allosteric regulation, and we also, the third level, we have the role of calcium ions. Now, the most important regulation is the hormonal regulation. This is the hormonal regulation of both the enzymes glycogen synthase and glycogen phosphorylase. The hormones which are affecting glycogen synthesis is, on one hand, glucagon and epinephrine. Okay. And on the other hand, we have insulin. Now let's look at what happens when glucagon or epinephrine binds to the membrane. So there are certain G protein coupled receptors which are present on the plasma membrane, and that will signal the need for the breakdown of glycogen. This is done either to elevate the blood glucose level or to provide energy for the exercising muscle. So this signal activates a cascade of reactions. What are these cascade of reactions? One is the activation of protein kinase A. So binding of epinephrine or glucagon, as I told you, to receptors, which are these receptors in turn is bound to G proteins, which activates the enzyme adenyl cyclase. The adenyl cyclase then catalyzes the conversion of ATP to cyclic AMP. The cyclic AMP formed will now activate the enzyme protein kinase A. So protein kinase A is a cyclic AMP dependent enzyme. The protein kinase A is a tetramer with 2 regulatory and 2 catalytic subunits. When cyclic AMP binds to the regulatory subunit, it releases its 2 catalytic subunits for carrying out its phosphorylating activity. So in this figure, it shows very nicely the binding of glucagon to the membrane, that is to the receptors present on the membrane, will activate the G protein. G proteins in turn will activate the enzyme adenylate cyclase. Adenylate cyclase will convert ATP to cyclic AMP. Cyclic AMP in turn will activate the enzyme protein kinase A, which is present in an inactive state. Protein kinase A has got 4 subunits, 2 catalytic subunits and 2 regulatory subunit. When cyclic AMP binds to the inactive protein kinase A, it is able to release the 2 catalytic subunits, which then go ahead to carry out its phosphorylation reactions. Now, Now, what phosphorylation reaction does protein kinase do? The enzyme phosphorylase kinase exists in two forms, that is an inactive form B and an active form A. Now, the active protein kinase A will phosphorylate the inactive form of phosphorylase kinase to form the active form. Now, this phosphorylated enzyme can be dephosphorylated by protein phosphatase, and this is done by the enzyme, by the hormone which has an opposite action, that is, it is promoted by insulin. Now, what does this phosphorylase kinase do? Phosphorylase kinase now goes on to activate glycogen phosphorylase. Glycogen phosphorylase exists in two forms. One is the dephosphorylated inactive B and the other is the phosphorylated active form A. Now, the active phosphorylase kinase converts glycogen phosphorylase to its active A form, which in turn will now carry out the breakdown of glycogen, that is glycogenolysis. Now, the active phosphorylase A can be dephosphorylated by the enzyme protein phosphatase, and this again is promoted by the hormone which has an opposite effect to glucagon, that is insulin. The protein phosphatases in turn can be inhibited by certain inhibitor proteins. So, this is the cascade of reactions that we see in the process of or in the regulation of glycogenolysis. So, glucagon, or in the case of the liver, or epinephrine in the case of both muscle and liver, binds to certain receptor proteins. These are G proteins. So, when it is bound to the receptor, these G proteins will then activate adenylate cyclase, which in turn promotes the conversion of ATP to cyclic AMP. Cyclic AMP will now activate inactive protein kinase A to the active form, that is active protein kinase A. The active protein kinase A will now phosphorylate the inactive phosphorylase kinase to the active form, that is active phosphorylase kinase. The active phosphorylase kinase will now act upon the inactive glycogen phosphorylase B and convert it to the active glycogen phosphorylase A. Once the active glycogen phosphorylase A is formed, it is able to bring about the breakdown of glycogen. Okay. Simultaneously, what does protein kinase A do? It will convert the active form of glycogen synthase to its inactive form. So, this is what is known as reciprocal regulation. That is, glucagon, epinephrine, if it is bound to the receptor and if glycogenolysis is what is needed, then it will bind to the receptor and will promote glycogenolysis. Simultaneously, it will also inhibit glycogen synthesis, that is, it will convert the active form of glycogen synthase A to the inactive form. So, the cascade of reactions is shown here, again shown here, that is the same which I showed you in the previous figure. Now, why do we need these cascade of reactions? That is, these large number of steps are required to amplify the hormonal signal, and also these reactions, from these reactions you can see that when one process is going on, that is glycogenolysis, there is the inhibition of the other process, which is glycogenesis. So, again going to how the inhibition of glycogen synthesis, I am just repeating it, by the cyclic AMP directed pathway. Glycogen synthase, I told you, occurs in two forms, the active A form and the inactive B form. The active form is the dephosphorylated form and the inactive form is the phosphorylated form. The phosphorylation is carried out by protein kinases and this is regulated by cyclic AMP. Glycogen synthase B can be converted back to its active form by means of protein phosphatase 1. So this figure again elegantly shows what happens here. That is how glycogen synthase can be converted from the active form to the inactive form. That is when glycogenolysis is occurring. But when glycogenesis is required, then the inactive form can be converted to the active form with the help of the enzyme protein phosphatase. And this is promoted by insulin. So that is the hormonal regulation. I told you the second aspect of regulation is the allosteric regulation. So both the enzymes glycogen synthase and phosphorylase respond to allosteric modulators and energy demands. In the well-fed state, what happens? We need to synthesize glycogen. So glycogen synthase B in both liver and muscle is allosterically activated by glucose 6-phosphate. So that you can see in the first A part, that is in the liver. What happens? You have the positive modulation by glucose 6-phosphate favoring the conversion of glucose 1-phosphate to glycogen. On the other hand, you find that the enzyme glycogen phosphorylase is being inhibited or negatively modulated both by glucose 6-phosphate and ATP. In the liver but not the muscle, glucose can allosterically activate. So in the second figure you can see, in the second figure you can see that glucose can activate glucose can allosterically inhibit glycogen phosphorylase A in the liver but not in the muscle. This can be seen in figure A. So a similar situation occurs in the muscle. Whenever glycogen synthesis is required, the synthesis of glycogen occurs, that is during the resting state of the muscle. You find that glucose 6-phosphate is a positive modulator and will promote the conversion of glucose 1-phosphate to glycogen. Whenever glycogenolysis occurs, that is during active exercise, you find that the glucose 6-phosphate and will then act as a negative modulator for glycogen synthase. Okay, they act as negative modulators because we need to have more of ATP being synthesized during active exercise. Now, in addition to hormones, allosteric modulators like glucose 6-phosphate, glucose, ATP, etc., we have a very important role of calcium. What is the role of calcium in glycogen degradation? Calcium is released into the cytoplasm. In muscle in response to neuronal stimulation, and in liver in response to epinephrine binding to alpha-1 adrenergic receptors. Once the calcium is released from the endoplasmic reticulum in response to either hormones or neurotransmitters, they then go and bind to calmodulin, which is a small calcium binding protein. The binding of 4 calcium molecules to calmodulin triggers a conformational change. Okay, and the activated calcium calmodulin complex then activates the proteins or enzymes like phosphorylase kinase B, and this happens independent of phosphorylation by protein kinase. So it is independent of the cyclic AMP dependent pathway. calcium activation of muscle phosphorylase kinase also occurs. During muscle contraction, you have a rapid urgent requirement for ATP, and this is supplied through the degradation of muscle glycogen. So what happens here? Glycogen is then converted to glucose through the EM pathway. Nerve impulses causes membrane depolarization, releases calcium from the sarcoplasmic reticulum into the sarcoplasm of myocytes. Okay, this calcium then goes on to bind carmodulin, which undergoes a conformational change, gets activated, and in turn activates muscle phosphorylase kinase. Okay, this activation of muscle phosphorylase kinase will then now promote the activation of glycogen phosphorylase, which then the activation of glycogen phosphorylase will then result in the breakdown of glycogen to give rise to glucose or glucose 1-phosphate. Now there is a role of AMP also in muscles. Under extreme conditions of anoxia and depletion of ATP, AMP also acts like a positive modulator of glycogen phosphorylase B without it being phosphorylated. So it becomes a positive modulator, activating it, and it will permit the conversion of glycogen to glucose 1-phosphate. Calcium also activates the liver phosphorylase kinase. So during a fight or flight situation, what happens? Epinephrine, the catecholamines, and like epinephrine is released from the adrenal medulla. Now this signals the need for blood glucose. This is initially obtained from hepatic glycogenolysis. So the binding of epinephrine to adrenogenic G protein coupled receptors activates the phospholipid dependent cascade, and movement of calcium from the endoplasmic reticulum to the cytoplasm. Calcium in turn binds to carmodulin, forming the active calcium carmodulin complex, which then activates hepatic phosphorylase kinase B. So this figure shows the binding of epinephrine to the adrenergic receptors, which in turn will now cause the breakdown of phospholipids to what is released is inositol triphosphate. Okay, this inositol triphosphate then acts as a modulator to stimulate the release of calcium from endoplasmic reticulum. This calcium now goes and binds to carmodulin, forming the calcium carmodulin complex, which then activates phosphorylase kinase. So this is again another method of activation of phosphorylase kinase, which is different from that of the cyclic AMP mediated protein kinase activation of phosphorylase kinase. Okay. So under regulation, we looked at the hormonal regulation, that is through on one side glucagon or epinephrine, and on the other side we have insulin. As you can see, the simplistic view here, the figure shows that glycogen synthase, that is synthesis, is promoted by insulin, and it promotes synthesis by converting the inactive glycogen synthase, which is phosphorylated, to the dephosphorylated form with the help of the enzyme protein phosphatase. On the other hand, glucagon will activate glycogen phosphorylase by phosphorylating it. Okay, so this is done through a cyclic AMP mediated process, where protein kinase will activate the enzyme phosphorylase kinase, which activates the enzyme glycogen phosphorylase, which in turn will bring about the degradation of glycogen. So depending upon what is required, you find that both insulin and glucagon have a reciprocal relationship with each other, either promoting glycogenesis or promoting glycogenolysis. Next questions which have been asked is the glycogen storage disorders. And as I told you, the most important disorder which you have to know is the von-Gil's disease. Any disorder, you have to first give the deficient enzyme. The deficient enzyme in this case is glucose 6-phosphatase. The major organ which is involved is the liver and the kidney. So as you can see in this figure, in this photograph of the child, you find that there is enlargement of the liver, there is fatty liver, and the enlargement of the liver, that is hepatomegaly, and the kidney is also involved, so there will be renal megaly. There is fasting hypoglycemia, there is a progressive renal disease, there will be growth retardation, and there will be an increased storage of glycogen. Okay. This also, in case of von-Gil's disease, you also find that a lot of the biochemical parameters are altered. That is, you have hyperlipidemia, hyperuricemia, and excess of lactic acid. So, why do you have all these typical features that we see, that is the changes in the biochemical parameters, is because glycogen is broken down to glucose 6-phosphate. But glucose 6-phosphate cannot get converted to glucose due to the deficiency of the enzyme glucose 6-phosphatase. So what are the options for glucose 6-phosphate? It can go through the HM pathway and give ribose 5-phosphate. Now the ribose 5-phosphate is, as you know, is a substrate for the formation of the nucleotides. That is, it can form PRPP, which in turn can give rise, which is the starting material for both purine and pyrimidine synthesis. And purines, when there is excess of purines formed, then what happens? They all get converted to uric acid, resulting in hyperuricemia. What is the other option for glucose 6-phosphate? Glucose 6-phosphate can go along the glycolytic pathway and give rise to glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. Glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate in the adipose tissue can get converted to glycerol 3-phosphate and can get converted to triacylglycerols, which can result in hyperlipidemia. Now the glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, if it goes further down the glycolytic pathway, can give rise to pyruvate. Pyruvate by transamination can give rise to alanine. So there can be increase in the level of alanine, or pyruvate can get converted to lactate, so there will be an increase in the levels of lactic acid. Pyruvate, if it enters the TCA cycle, can give rise to acetyl-CoA. Excess of acetyl-CoA can either lead to fatty acid synthesis or it can lead to cholesterol biosynthesis. So the typical biochemical changes that we see in von-Gil's disease due to the deficiency of the enzyme glucose 6-phosphatase has been very nicely explained in this figure. That is, you have hypoglycemia, hyperlipidemia, increase in alanine, increase in lactic acid, and hyperuricemia. Now, how do you remember the different types of glycogen storage disorders? One way I remember is by thinking of the cricketer Corey Anderson. He was an all-rounder, and a versatile player. So, versatile player Corey Anderson made history. That is how I try to remember it. V is von-Gil's. Okay, the enzyme which is deficient. Von-Gil's, please remember, glucose 6-phosphatase. Player, the P represents Pompey's disease. Pompey has got that OM, so you can remember lysosomal alpha 1, alpha 4 glycosidase. Corey's disorder. Now, how do you remember the enzyme? What comes after C is D. So, it is D branching enzyme. Anderson, A. What comes after B is the branching enzyme. So, Corey, the enzyme is D branching enzyme. Anderson's disease, the enzyme is the branching enzyme. made history. So M, McArdle, it is muscle glycogen phosphorylase. H, Hers, it is hepatic glycogen phosphorylase. So these are the main glycogen storage disorders. Von Gerks, you may get it in detail. Pompe, the features of all these disorders has been given in a table in your textbook which you can read. But what is important to remember, very often you are asked as 1 mark questions, is the enzyme deficiency. So von Gerks you have to know in detail. The enzyme deficiency I have enlisted, and how to try to remember these enzyme deficiency I have given you a clue through this versatile player Corey Anderson made history. Thank you.